And so here we are. And this is a great, good moment for each and every one of us. I mean, sometimes coming to the center on a Sunday, going to church on a Sunday, going to temple on a Friday, and going to the mosque on a Friday, and so on, becomes routine. It can become routine. It's just something we do. And yet when we get there, we find ourselves there. When we get there, we're always glad we arrived. But there's nothing routine about it. It's the most significant and one of the most important things we could show up for, because it indicates that we are interested in our spiritual unfoldment. It indicates that we are interested in becoming spiritually skilled. And as a result of that, being a wonderful, wonderful energy in the world, a healing balm in the world, a comfort in the world, someone that makes a difference in the world. And so here you are, you precious people, all with that in mind, whether consciously or not, it's there. And so last week we looked at this thing called love and compassion, and this week we look at love and forgiveness. Well, of course, to speak about love means to speak about forgiveness and vis-a-vis, because they go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, really, because love is unconditioned and unconditional. And so picture the courtroom with many, many people in it, and people are there in that room because a very precious 12-year-old son of a young African-American mother had been gunned down because of racist hatred. And the trial was going on. And so everybody thought, well, we'll be in and out of here in a hurry because the evidence is so stacked up against this young teenage man who had done the dastardly deed. Nobody thought it would go on for any length of time. And so all his attorney could think of doing was giving him an opportunity to explain himself and talk about his life. So the young teenager started off telling about his life in a very, just a very casual way, and no great emotion or anything, no sense of remorse. And but then in the middle of the story, he got to a point where he said, "I've never ever been wanted. Nobody has ever wanted me. I've never been wanted. Nobody has ever wanted me. I had no mother. I had no mother." And as he got into that, his shoulders slouched, and his face changed, and his eyes softened, and he began to cry. And he began to sob. Nobody ever wanted me. I had no mother. And all you could hear in the courtroom was the young man sobbing. And then just below the sobbing was heard a voice. "I will be your mother." A voice brimming over with gentleness and compassion and kindness and understanding. And everybody was surprised, so they turned to the voice. And then they were astounded to see it was the young mother whose son had been killed by this young man. And she stood up and she moved toward the young man, the young teenager, and she said, "I will be your mother. Until the day I die, I will be your mother. I have no son now. Will you be my son?" And so when the judge wiped the tears from his eyes, he looked out and he saw all the eyes reddening on the prosecutor and the boy's attorney and all the people crying in the courtroom. And the young man just looked up, aghast at this woman, and said to her, "You want me to be your son?" And she just gently whispered, "Yes." More crying, more sobbing. And then the young man pulled himself together and said, "Then I will be your son." That's loving forgiveness. That goes beyond anything any of us could understand. That's radical forgiveness. The courage, the compassion, the understanding of that woman in the light of her own brokenheartedness at the loss of her precious son, to be able to reach out and do that. That day, that courtroom was transformed, and everybody in it was transformed. My dear ones, these stories abound. These things happen, much more than you and I will ever hear. They don't make the news, but they happen. And the reason why they happen is because deep within us have been sown the seeds of compassion, the seeds of forgiveness, the seeds of understanding, the seeds of kindness, and they grow out of the soil of unconditioned and unconditional love. And it's hard for us sometimes to comprehend that there could be a forgiveness, a love like that, and yet it is so. And this lady would call herself just an ordinary, everyday mother, trying to do the best she could to make it in a world and make a world better for her son to grow up in. In that moment, hatred and racism ended in that courtroom, within the young boy and anybody else who may have been inclined. Forgiveness. We have to understand that forgiveness is only for those of us in creation. Forgiveness is there so that you and I can forgive and be forgiven. We don't need to seek forgiveness from God, because God is unconditional love and unconditioned love, and will always and ever love us no matter what. Stories abound too in all of the scriptures. Does the shepherd not leave all his sheep and go after the one that's lost? Is there not more rejoicing in heaven over the return of one wayward sheep than all the others who are there? The stories abound for us to see and experience and feel, and yet there's something in the mortal mind, in the human psyche, that wants to grab onto grudges and grouses and resentments and bitterness and desire revenge and desire punishment for those who upset us and cause us pain. We have to understand that goes back to reptilian times. That's the brain at the back of our heads there that causes that to happen. It's always going to be with us. It's to fight them or flee away from them. So there is that tenacity in us too, to do that, to fight or to run. And that's what our lack of forgiveness comes from, our old brain. But we have advanced since then. We don't have to stay there. We don't have to be there in that old energy. And those of us who are committed to an unfolding spiritual life must come into that grace, that auspices of radical forgiveness at times in our lives. What is forgiveness? It's the gift we give ourselves. It is the care we take of ourselves, of our souls. Forgiveness is the releasing and the letting go of all bitterness and resentments and indignation and self-righteousness and a desire for revenge and punishment on those who have hurt us. And at the very least, it's an inability not to let somebody off the hook and leave them dangling, which doesn't comport with divine love, or the way of divine love, or the way of the soul, or the way of the spirit. That's the way of the ego. There's something in the ego that always wants to be judge and jury and executioner too, that wants to punish. Because it's frightened, it's afraid. That's why. Belongs to the reptilian brain, the old mind. And so we have an opportunity in this coming week to look at ourselves. Did you know, I didn't until recently, that there is an International Forgiveness Institute founded by a doctor from University of Wisconsin called Dr. Robert Enright. And he's accredited for having produced these forgiveness studies. And of course, it makes perfect sense to me. Why? Because there's a whole lot of pain and hurt in the world. And we have to find some way of healing and managing all of that. makes perfect. And in the research that has been done, it has been shown that those of us who are inclined to be all caught up in our bitterness and resentment and wanting revenge and so on, are people who demonstrate characteristics of, being neurotic and angry and hostile much of the time. And in those people's lives, the research shows up all kinds of different illnesses and lack of ability to be present, lack of ability to be connected, lack of ability to have good relationships, and so on and so on and so on down the line. On the other hand, people who are open and prone to being able to forgive are people who live much happier and healthier lives. They are people who are connected and enjoy much more wonderful relationships. The benefits of forgiveness are amazing and multitudinous, really. The benefits of being able to forgive. It means that if I can give up, if I can let go of, if I can surrender that sense of resentment within me, that sense of bitterness within me that causes me to be twisted in some way, that sense of self-righteousness and indignation and that sense of wanting people to get their comeuppances all of the time, then I can be a much more happy, healthy individual on this plane. I am open to the promise of the present moment and its possibility. I have a sense of hope. I have a sense of looking on the bright side of life. I'm an optimist. I'm more inclined to be someone who can thrive and flourish and go forward. And as I do that in my own life, create all kinds of goodness around me and about me. There's a great benefit to being able to forgive. An amazing benefit. There's always going to be pain and hurt and sorrow and sadness on this plane. We will bump into each other. We will hurt each other. We will misunderstand each other. We will misrepresent each other. But we have to know how to move through that when we do. A simple definition of forgiveness is stopping wanting another person to be hurt because they hurt me. Not wanting for them what they have done to me or what we think they have done unto me. If we want to be in the company of those who got it, those who understood, like that young African-American lady, if we want to be in such company, then we have to remember those words. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. If we were anywhere near in our right minds, we would not wish any harm on anybody, no matter how badly they hurt us. We could be like the Dalai Lama when he was told the news of all his monks and nuns who had been brutally murdered by the Chinese. When he was crying and through his tears said, "Now let's pray for the Chinese people." We could be like the young man cycling home to his wife and family, knowing that life was good and it was taking a good course and turn for him and his family, who was plowed down by a drunk driver and with the losing of his leg, lost the course of his life. But yet, he could forgive the drunk driver. We could be like the Amish families, all their children mowed down at school, and yet had forgiveness for the killer of those children, and indeed embraced his wife and his children. We could identify with those kinds of people, rather than the ones who want everybody to get their comeuppance. And the thing about comeuppance is you and I never have to care about that, or worry about that, or be concerned about that. The law of life takes care of that. The law of life takes care of that. Why would you and I choose to be imprisoned and embittered and under the control of somebody who has hurt us for years and years and years? Those people who hold grudges can hold them for decades, and throughout the decades want revenge. Can you imagine what that is doing to their lives, to their bodies, to their spirits, to their souls? You know it. You've seen it in families. You've seen family feuds, people against each other for decades, going to their graves without resolving issues, and so on. And you've seen the havoc that can cause. But you and I are called to know something more than this. You and I are called to think from a higher point of view. You and I are called to allow those seeds that are deep within us, that can grow up out of that love that is within us, of compassion and understanding and wisdom and kindness and loving, open receptivity for the good of all, no matter what they do or who they are. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. We don't know what we're doing when we get up to mischief. We don't know what we're doing when we're berating each other, misalignment with each other, going into misalignment with each other, maligning each other, gossiping about each other, out of our own fears and insecurities, out of our own jealousies and envy, out of our own awareness of being less than. We're frightened, we're scared when we do that. Something's frightening us, something's scaring us when we do that. We're not ourselves. We have to come home like the prodigal. We have to come to ourselves and get up out of the condition, move out of it and make our way back home to the truth of our being and the truth of ourselves, back into that unconditioned and unconditional place that is deep within each and every one of us, that you and I have access to at any time. Come home to ourselves. Why is it, we ask ourselves, why is it that I'm so miserable? Why is it that I can't really genuinely congratulate somebody when something good happens to them without feeling envious and jealous, without wishing that was me and not them? What is that all about? What stops and blocks my beauty, my grace, my goodness, my truth? What is that? It's the on, and on again. The unrenewed mind. The unrenewed mind. We are told, put on the mind that was in Christ Jesus. Put on the Buddha mind. There's no other way of you and I being able to maneuver through this plane with grace, with ease, in peace and in joy, coming from loving kindness and compassion. There is no other way except through divine grace. Grace that leads us, grace that sets us free. And that's the Christ mind. That's the Buddha mind. We have to go higher in our thinking, and if I be lifted up into a higher conscious awareness of life and living, can draw all good unto and through myself. I can release anything I need to release. I can attract any good thing. I can take care of any condition. I can live from the fountain of faith that is within me. Now, I either believe or I don't believe. I either have faith or I am faithless. There's no in between. I have faith or I don't. I believe or I don't believe. If you and I believed what we say we believed, our lives would be lifted up, transformed, and take a new direction. So this coming week, we get to ask ourselves, where am I on this path of love and forgiveness? How forgiving am I? Am I one of those people that has opened a resentment bank account? And do I enter into that resentment bank account as I go along life and living? If I do have one of those accounts, then I get to close it down this week, to wipe it out this week, to release it out of my life this week, that bank of resentments. Because when I have a bank of resentment accounts, as somebody once said, then I'm going to go down in blames. I will go down in blames. And the ingredients of blame is accusation, condemnation, humiliation, desire for revenge and punishment. That's not where we want to be. That's not who we are. In this room are good people. Good people. Good people in this room, and yet look how we are challenged. We, the good people, look how we are challenged through envy and jealousy and resentment, and so on, the list goes. Now, if we good people are challenged in this way, what do you think is happening out in the wider world where people are not as conscious? I'm not saying not as good. I'm saying not as conscious, not as aware. So how are we going to change it up? How are we going to make the difference? By putting on the mind that was in Christ Jesus. By renewing our minds. Remember, in the world there will be vicissitudes and all kinds of ailments. But fear not, for the great I am has overcome the world. And that great I am is within you, it's within me. We are told it is in stillness, it is in silence, it is in quietude that our strength and confidence lies. So you and I have to get quiet, my dears, this week and look at what's going on. Just listen. Listen, we will be inspired to know where we are along this road of love and forgiveness and compassion and so on. And then you and I will have a decision to make. Why should we forgive? It's easy. Because we can. We can. It's one of the best gifts we could give to ourselves. It's the forgiveness of ourselves for all the ways we have disappointed ourselves and let ourselves down. For all the times we have berated ourselves and put ourselves down. That's the first thing we do. Start with ourselves. And then work our way through all the other people that we have grudges and grouses against. And start the forgiveness diet. This is the week for it. Because we can do this. Not by ourselves, but through the power and the presence of the Spirit within us that strengthens us and that does the work. Oh no, you and I are not capable of this at all. But the grace and the goodness and the power and the unconditional love of Spirit within us can lead the way, can go before us and make the way straight before us for this work of ours to be done. It has to be done sooner or later. Let's do it sooner rather than later. Whatever that grouse, whatever that grudge is, I can guarantee you it's stopping and blocking our lives. It's creating conditions in our lives that are toxic that we don't want. Whatever that is. So the freedom of letting go of all of that heavy weight, that toxic weight, that stops us from ever being satisfied, ever coming into joy, ever being peaceful, ever being present to the moment because we're so preoccupied with past hurts, etc., makes no sense to a spiritually unfolding individual. None whatsoever. So I'm going to ask us again to remember the story of that young mother, the son she lost and the son she gained, and to go to where she went to be able to do what she did. If one of us can do it, all of us can do it. It is given to us because amazing grace resides within each and every one of us. So I have to say in this moment now, I am deeply sorry for anything I have ever done, thought, said to offend, aggrieve, or hurt anybody. Always, every day of my life, I am sorry for that. And I have to know within myself that whatever that was, it was unintentional. Unintentional. I knew not what I did. I knew not what I did. So I'll be looking at that this week, and I know you will be too. because it's given to you and it's given to me to come higher. It's given to you and given to me to be the love that the world needs, to be the light that the world needs, to be the forgiving, healing balm that the world needs just now. And so I ask you, my dear ones, are you willing this week to take a look at your resentment bank account? We all have one. Let's not kid ourselves. And are we ready to close it down? Yes. Are we ready to close it down? Yes. Are we ready to shut the thing down? Yes. Thank you. Now I feel that there's going to be a great good healing in the land this week, and you and I are going to feel so light and so good as a result of our commitment to love and kindness and compassion and forgiveness, and as a result of that, deeply experience the amazing grace of sweet spirit itself. Yes? Yes. And so it is.